A lot of people say that no code can't scale and that it's only good for building MVPs, but I think this interview proves them wrong. I spoke to Alex Rainey, who's one of the co-founders of MyAskAI. Together with his co-founder Mike, in just 18 months, they have built an AI customer support product which does 75,000 conversations a month and is generating $39,000 MRR every month. And they've done it all on Bubble. I speak to him about the evolution of the product idea, how they grew it so fast, and how they've optimized Bubble to handle that scale. Let's get into it. Speaking to people like you really just gets me inspired and excited. So yeah, I'd love to, if you could just like tell me about your background and how you got into this and what sparked the idea and stuff, and what got you into like no code in the first place. That would be awesome.
Yeah, sure. So going way, way back, first point in my career was at Accenture, so technology consultant, started to learn about product, about technology, but not on a kind of nitty-gritty hands-on level, but just working with designers and developers. That just got me very interested in this space, but I always knew that I wanted to do something myself. After about 6 years there, I founded a travel insurance and then a travel planning startup with a couple of friends. We raised some money for that. And we went at that properly for a few years, going down the kind of typical VC fundraising route. Pandemic sort of had other ideas for the business, especially since we're in the travel space. That was quite a challenging environment. But again, that kind of filled that thirst of, okay, really fun building your own product. I wish I could get a little bit more hands-on with it because a lot of that was being coded by some developers in the Ukraine with React Native and stuff. So I couldn't really get involved on a very, very deep level, but I did really enjoy talking with them about very granular things and kind of solutioning problems and ideas that we were trying to kind of build out. And after that wound down, I kind of bounced around between a couple of small projects myself, became a father, put a couple of these kind of smaller SaaS, micro SaaS products on acquire.com and managed to sell a few of those, which gave me a little bit of capital to kind of not necessarily have to jump into a job straight away next. And then I met Mike, who's my current co-founder, who we have some friends in common. And we started to kind of riff off a bunch of different ideas that we had. We each had a kind of long list of ideas that we were like, oh, that's a good idea on your list. That's a good idea on my list. We were kind of quickly trying out a lot of those. Then GPT-3 comes out. This is kind of, I can't remember the year, but it must be like late 2022 or something. And that's all we can think about. That's all we want to try and work on. I'm sure like the same with every kind of new or young builder that didn't have a project that was kind of consuming all the time. So we ended up creating this university writing application, which a lot of people thought was quite unethical at the time. Now I think people would kind of laugh at that as being unethical compared to everything else that's being done today. But that was considered unethical at the time for writing UCAS statements in the UK. And we very quickly realized that fine tuning the model would give you kind of 10x better results than the generic model. It's hard for everyone to remember how bad GPT-3 was in comparison, but you needed to fine tune to like make it feel like a good personal statement. So we trained on like 800 statements and we got a really, really good outcome from that. And we realized that B2C, difficult, tough, don't really want to be in that space. We found a lot of people were interested in fine tuning models. So we pivoted to a kind of B2B where people could upload a CSV and they would fine tune a model that came out the back of that. And then what we actually realized was that people weren't looking to fine tune models, they were looking to chat with their data. And they thought that fine tuning was the way that they were going to do that. And then the chat with your data trend starts to kind of explode a little bit. And us and a couple of other players all start to come out at very similar times with fairly similar products. You know, upload a PDF, add a couple of web pages, get a little widget added onto your website, and chat with it. And this was kind of the early stages of the retrieval augmented generation RAG. And it was kind of simplistic back then, but it allowed you to talk with 100 PDFs and get an answer that was kind of nestled in one paragraph in one of them. So that was some kind of mind-blowing technology for everyone in terms of that like technological capability that was suddenly available. And it was pretty cheap to do and it was fairly easy to set up. We carried on down that path of kind of a generic chat with your data product for about a year. And we hit a bit of a plateau around, I want to say 10K MRR dollars. Some of our competitors were growing much more quickly than us. Some of them were also stagnating. Many were dying because there just wasn't enough space in the market for all of us. So we made the decision to kind of niche down, which is, you know, the kind of more typical startup advice that we probably should have considered it a little bit earlier on because we didn't really have a an ICP or a kind of really specific target customer or use case that we were going after. So we said to ourselves, what is a really great fit for this technology? Where can we show some real gains? How can we charge some good money for that? Where would we be able to generate meaningful value for a business that would allow them to pay good dollar for this? And customer service was something that just kind of kept coming up for us. So we kind of crunched through all of our customers and we looked at everyone that was using our product. We realized that about 60-70% of our revenue was concentrated in this sort of customer support use case. That was sort of tick number two. Felt good. The data backed that up. So we basically sort of forked our product. Very early on in our startup life, we created our kind of first legacy product, which was the first one we created, and we kind of put it on the side, let people keep using it if they wanted to use it. But we decided to build a completely new product from scratch. To cut to where we are now, we've just been head down on the customer support use case, predominantly for SaaS companies, building out a lot of integrations with Intercom, with Zendesk, and a lot of the other big customer service platforms, because we do strongly believe that companies want to keep using those platforms, but we can be the kind of AI layer that replaces whatever AI feature that the native provider offers, like Intercom Fin or Zendesk AI in those cases. We don't want to compete with the entire customer service platform. We just want to compete at that kind of micro horizontal layer of basically being the AI customer support agent and then handing over to human and letting their platform handle the rest of it. That's our kind of story. And I guess the only bit I didn't touch on was the no code part of that. But Mike and I very quickly realized that we could move much quicker and spend a lot less money if we could do a lot of the building ourselves. And I was a bit of a self-taught developer for a few years before that. Towards the end of my last startup, I had a bit more time. I really enjoyed that, but I'd never been taught from the ground up, so I wouldn't feel confident building an entire web app, for instance, or authentication or connecting the database or something like that. But I understood the concepts very well, and I think if you understand the concepts, then and you've got a slightly technical and a product head on you, and a little bit of design as well, of course, then no code would suit you really, really well. And I found that a product like Bubble, when I was first introduced that, I can't remember how I found it, was just this kind of perfect match of kind of semi-technical, but kind of non-coding platform where you could build really, really quickly if you just understood some quite high-level technical concepts. And if you had a good product head, then yeah, you could. There's a very small limit of what you can't do, and we constantly thought, as we've gone on the journey of the last year, like, yeah, we're gonna have to build a separate backend for this particular part, or this intercom integration, or something like that, or like the widget that we load on people's sites. But every time we've kind of pushed Bubble and we've been like, no, we can actually achieve this with Bubble. So we've been pretty amazed by that. We do have a backend that runs some parts of our app, but I'd say like 80% of our app, including the back end and everything, runs completely off Bubble, which I think a lot of people find quite surprising.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you told me that in a tweet the other day, and I was surprised because my impression of you guys is that you're hitting some serious scale now. And so I was, yeah, you always hear people saying, "Oh, is it going to scale and stuff?" I kind of assumed that you would have at some point had to switch, but like I
Mm.
was overjoyed to hear that you haven't. Are you able to give me some idea of like the scale of like the number of kind of widgets you have out there, or the number of chats that are going on a typical day?
Yeah. So, well, over a month, we typically see around, I think at the moment, about 75,000 conversations happening. So I guess that's a few thousand a day on average. And those are coming from our widgets, those are coming from Intercom, those are coming from Zendesk and a bunch of our other integrations. The majority probably come from the widget, which loads and renders on everyone's site. Kind of Bubble at the bottom, but like Intercom Messenger. Yeah, I mean, we thought the same thing at many points. We were like, God, when we get to a few thousand conversations a month, we're going to need to build this in code. We're going to need to build the widget in code because it's going to be requested, tens of thousands of times a day every time one of our customers site loads or they open it, even if they didn't have a conversation. And we're going to receive tens of thousands of webhook events from Intercom and Zendesk, and we only need to reply to a small amount of those. So just like, wow, this is going to go crazy if we get 50,000 conversations. It'd be like millions of like API calls happening every few days. But when we moved over to enterprise, which was one kind of essential thing, so kind of dedicated plan on Bubble, just to basically close off the stability issues. And they've had a rough patch over the last couple of months, or like 3 months back. It was particularly rough. And we just got so much heat from some of our enterprise customers. We're just like, we either need to move off the platform, or we need proper stability. And I think we found that with the dedicated plan. And then we also have the capability to just dial up that infrastructure quite significantly if we need to. But then we've also worked with that team and a consultant or an agency as well, um, to make a bunch of optimizations. We were able to like probably drop our kind of CPU usage or workload unit usage by maybe 70 or 80% by just spending 2 weeks, like really focusing and thinking about how things should properly be done. Because you don't think about that when you start building on Bubble. And we started building before workload units was a concept. So no one really cared if you made a database request with every page load, but now everyone cares. And you've got to really think about that stuff smart or intelligently. So yeah, there's been a big learning curve there as well.
Yeah, it's a really cool story though. I mean, I kind of like assumed that that was like one of your first things and you just like hit it exactly right with the timing. So it's like it's kind of reassuring to hear that you had actually been in the space for a while before and you did like what you're supposed to do, which is build one product, listen to the customers, like look at how it's being used, and then figure, okay, let's just niche down and focus on this one use case, which seems ideal. Obviously, customer support, it does come with that added pressure that you need like continual decent
Mm.
uptime. And if things go wrong in the middle of the night, I guess you have some stress of a lot of
Yeah.
customers calling you up. But at the same time, it is like it's a use case that, yeah, so many companies have, um, which yeah, I think is great. I've been toying around with like voice APIs and stuff, and
Mm.
thinking about building some kind of, yeah, like a phone related app. And I made it do like outbound calls with AI. But I just figured like the inbound customer support use case must be so much more pressing than like making outbound sales calls. And I feel like people, if they're calling for customer support, they're going to be happier to talk to an AI than receive a
Mm.
call from a unsolicited AI
Yeah.
who's trying
Yeah.
to sell you something.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, we always said earlier on that we didn't want to be we're a two-person business, right? And we aggressively want to keep it that way. And if ever we come into an obstacle that means we need more people, then we work very hard to try and automate that. We build a lot of internal tools to ensure that we can keep our operation really, really lean, principally and also just from a cost perspective, I guess. But we we realized we kind of we wanted very early on to not be a business that required significant uptime and was something that was kind of critical as part of someone's infrastructure. And obviously, it's not as critical as their hosting or something like Cloudflare or something, but customers contact big businesses all throughout the day, 24 hours a day. And if the widget they're using is broken or the intercom integration that they rely on is broken for half an hour or an hour, that could affect tens, hundreds, or maybe thousands of customers at the right point in the day. We've seen that in the early days because we've made mistakes and we've pushed things that we didn't test properly, and people got very annoyed at us. We've learned a lot of lessons around how we harden that and how we run automated tests on things as well. But it's ended up us just being this business that is quite a critical part of people's kind of support infrastructure. But then you also realize that the plus to doing that is you can charge a lot more money when you are a kind of critical part of something. So you can be a softer part of someone's infrastructure where they don't rely on you and you can be down for a couple of hours and it's not a big issue. But there's probably a limit to where you can really charge and extract from that customer if you are that kind of service. But if you are something like Cloudflare or something super essential as part of their workflow, like an intercom, then you can charge a premium because you need to be always on and you need to be on your A game all the time.
I remember when I first like interviewed you or Mike, I can't remember who, but like it was only I think 3 months after you'd launched, and you were already at like 6K MRR, which seemed just crazy. Like how did you get it to grow so fast from day one?
Yeah, so if we wind back to that fine tuning sort of business that we had, which we ended up spinning off and selling on acquire.com as well to kind of give us some seed capital for the next version. But um, we quickly started speaking to customers when we had that product, and we said to them, you know, fine tuning might not be the thing you're after. You may be looking for this other pattern, which is where you can upload loads of information and add your website, and then you can kind of chat to it, and it would give you an answer from all that information. If this is something that's interesting, you can pay now. And I think we were charging like $100, and we said we're going to charge $100 a month, but you're going to get 6 months free for $100. So you're basically getting like a $500 discount, and we'll try and release it in the next kind of month or so. We thought we might get a little bit of interest, but predominantly some conversations from that. But that just went so much better than we expected, and we ended up getting a couple of $1,000 in pre-sales just from that. And then we launched quite quickly after that, and that kind of helped us grow into a base of users that were actually subscribing and paying the normal rate as well. And I think there was just a really good sort of energy at the time and the kind of chat with your data startup. So I think we got very lucky on the timing side of things there. There's some of our competitors who managed to take, you know, instead we were on 6 and they were on, you know, 20. So, you know, our success was kind of 3 or 4x what they were feeling. But we all just kind of got this bump from the timing that people were just really, really interested in this space. I think a lot of that is gone now, and there isn't any of that kind of super quick growth in this space necessarily. Obviously, you get that quick growth in some other kind of completely new areas, but I think the kind of heydays of growing really quickly with the chat with your data stuff is gone. But yeah, timing I think is probably the most important thing. And then obviously we had to have a product which delivered on the basic expectations that people had, but that wasn't super complex to achieve back then.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then in terms of like ongoing marketing, how do you reach out to companies to see? Because I guess like yeah, every company kind of needs this, and certainly big organizations, Citizens Advice or any like government organizations could do with this kind of thing on their website. How do you
Yeah.
find them?
We firstly narrowed down a little bit. So we predominantly look at technology companies, so kind of SaaS companies. We feel like we can understand their customer support um, much better than, say, an ecom business. And obviously, yeah, fine, they all have customer support, but the types of queries that they get and the types of things that an AI customer support agent would be expected to do are very different. Ecom, you're looking at, you know, order updates, maybe even doing refunds, stuff like this. SaaS, you're looking at quite technical questions, looking at questions about APIs. You might be troubleshooting kind of over a longer thread back and forth with people. So there's a bit more of a sophistication there. So we do kind of narrow our usage, our user base down a little bit in that sense and look at other technology businesses. In terms of how we're getting out to them, we generally see that our kind of web presence, partly intentional, partly unintentional, is what drives the majority of our inbound at the moment. And we kind of live predominantly off a lot of that inbound that comes from directories we're making, blog posts we're publishing, you know, generally just making sure that our site is ranking well. And we're being really considerate around the keywords and things that we're going after and the kind of the types of users and queries that we're trying to position ourselves highly in front of. Um, we are trying a little bit of outbound recently. We're starting to see a little bit of success with that, but it's probably a little bit too early. We've dabbled with some paid ads. Again, it's quite early, but earlier on, especially with paid ads, I've learned this a few times in my life, but you know, the ROI is very, very punishing. And you kind of have to bear with it for a very long time, even though it may not even work out at the end of that road, but you're not going to see any super quick returns, I don't think. So I think predominantly for us is, yeah, it is the SEO, it is the web presence. We're trying out some ads and some outbound. And then we also just find that word of mouth is probably one of our, again, most significant drivers when we have a really good win or success with a particular company, then we just find that, you know, we get a kind of trickle of other users and good customers that sort of come in after that. So you can really feel some inertia sometimes when you start to get a few good customers in.
Yeah. Do you have like a little powered by on the widget so that people can
Yeah,
click through? Is that quite
yeah,
effective as well?
we see some decent traffic through it. I think it's it's probably an overall lower value type of user that we see coming in from that. We actually see the vast majority of our revenue now coming from our Intercom and Zendesk integrations, and we've got apps or integrations that are live in both of their app stores or marketplaces, and that kind of boosts our web presence, albeit within their kind of internal ecosystems. So we do see some decent inbound coming from them as well. So yeah, it's a bit of a combination, but I think just yeah, SEO web presence I think is the one that we're going to kind of push a little bit harder on and sort of double down on.
Yeah, and that's super cool. So you came from a background in consulting. Do you think that the skills you learned at Accenture, which I know is like notoriously difficult to get a job with them, do you think the skills you learned there like have been really useful in what you're doing now, or is it like a completely different skill set?
I'd say nothing from a technical perspective. Very much so from working with teams, working with individuals who are doing work for you, kind of basic communication and team working skills. But a lot of us take that stuff for granted if you haven't worked in a company that has kind of tried and tested ways of kind of working with teams and kind of instilling some really, really great principles with you for how you communicate your ideas and how you communicate problems and how you break down problems into solutions. That kind of thinking, I think I picked up massively from my time at Accenture. Um, so yeah, I think a lot of the kind of analytical thinking, problem solving, communication side of skills, which I guess are the softer sort of skills. A lot of that massively came from Accenture. The technical stuff, it's really all just been learned by doing. I kind of seldom watch a tutorial or follow a guide on some coding or some bubble stuff. I really just like to kind of go at it and maybe consult the guys later if you kind of run into any issues. And it helps that AI can kind of do that with coding now as well, because you can kind of build first and ask later and kind of just plow into stuff without having to understand a lot of the fundamentals on a kind of deep level, which kind of suits me as someone with ADHD. You can just kind of move quite quickly and not have to spend a few days kind of understanding and reading and learning a lot of the kind of core principles. So yeah, we try to just, and that's a general principle with our business as well, as we try to move exceptionally quickly. We try to execute really, really quickly. And we do pride ourselves on probably being one of the fastest in the space in terms of standing up new integrations, launching new features for enterprise customers, whatever that stuff is. We love that consistent feedback from our customers, is that they just love the pace at which we're pushing out new stuff and improving things and responding to feedback.
Yeah, that's a really cool USP, for sure. And like, yeah, you see in the products you use every day, like I use Arc browser and they're always pushing new features and updates, or at least they were until a couple of months ago. And but it just makes you realize that there's a team there who actually cares about the product and
Mm,
is like listening to feedback and trying to make it better, which is a really positive signal, I think, which you don't
yeah.
get from many products. Um, do you okay, you don't have to share any, this is like last question. You don't have to share any details you don't want to. But obviously if I want to send this in a newsletter or put it on a YouTube video, I need like a snappy clickbait title. So are you willing to share like any figures that would like excite people to be like, oh wow,
Mm.
that sounds awesome. I don't know, like yeah, doesn't have to be MRR, but something about number of users, or you just bought a Porsche, I don't know.
We're quite comfortable with a lot of our metrics and sharing stuff. So we're closing in on about 35K MRR.
Nice.
And a lot of that has come, the vast majority has come since we changed over to being a customer service focused product for SaaS. And again, we've seen the big leaps after going after these integrations in Intercom and Zendesk and some of those others as well. Um, and then yeah, the other big one is that kind of 75K conversations a month. That's probably a number we are prouder of and we like more. I guess the revenue is kind of sort of lagging in some ways, but we love to see the usage. More usage is obviously leads to more money because of the usage-based pricing that we have, but it also shows that it's providing some value to people, especially as the conversations get deeper. Number of messages per conversation increases. That kind of stuff is really really important to us.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And it also shows that yes, like Bubble can scale if you build the app correctly, then it can
Yeah.
handle all this traffic. Okay, that's awesome. I don't have any more questions. Is there anything you'd like to add, or anything you'd like to any place you'd like people to find you, or anything like that?
If they want to find us, myaskai.com. If you're looking to get customer support powered by AI for your company, then come on over and we'll show you what we can do.
Awesome. Thank you very much.